time and time again till the very end. What a game from Namibia in this first best of three.
Splendid work, right? I mean, phenomenal stuff from the side of Namibia, but from South Africa, you gotta start thinking. When the Sabres, when the CCs get banned, even the Ixia, it does seem like they're just not too comfortable on these picks, Eterna, right? All throughout the game, even the Roger, it does feel like he was playing it more like a Saber, walking up, trying to look for those assassinations, and it's just a completely different hero. And I think for now, Namibia, they've been able to utilize the data that we were talking about just of yesterday's games that were streamed to completely bully them into drafts. This is another rare case that we have seen so far that it's just a pure outdraft. Namibia have been able to take everything, and you mentioned it earlier in the draft as well. It looked like they have a core understanding of what prio picks are in the meta currently because they went in for the first pick, Fredrin, and then they were hovering over to Angela that they decided not to go for, but they still went for the Vexana. So still very, very good understanding of the prio picks that we have currently. And it seems like they're also comfortable on these prio picks, right? The big concern for us, for a lot of these players, is that are they going to be able to perform on these prio picks that might not really be a comfort pick for them on, the technically the online stage that we have here, because it is going to be a stream match. Additional pressure added in. Usually a lot of teams, a lot of players, they opt to go for their comfort picks over their prio. But it doesn't seem like, for Namibia at least, they had any problems with utilizing and executing the prio picks. They played very, very well.
For sure, right? The Fredrin did the job perfectly, being able to get 100% of the turtle rate. All these
Mhm.
objectives were given over to Namibia. And with the help as well of the Angela and the healing coming through, it was very difficult for South Africa to actually put into a fight. But there were so many moments where South Africa actually looked for more active plays on the map. But again, back to this, right? Highlighting the plays coming in from the Melissa, denying these rotations from South Africa to look for trades over the map. If they lose an objective, they wanted to go for a gank onto Melissa. But the Melissa Dark Emperor was so great at denying all these plays from happening from South Africa, and they were left with absolutely no choice on what to do all across the board. Were they supposed to go for counter takes in the objectives? The Roger was already falling so far behind in terms of that EXP to get that retribution battle in a 50-50. Were they supposed to look for picks? Instantly denied away. Thamus was doing a great job in the lane as well in the EXP to hold her ground, and so did the Melissa. So what would you think would have been the proper adjustment from South Africa aside from the drafting? Was it execution in the game?
For sure. I think the execution could make they could make a lot of things happen through the execution, right? I think the execution was definitely a big problem for them because the way that they were tackling the game was a bit confusing as well. It just doesn't feel like they were comfortable on these picks. Again, I already mentioned it earlier, but Fatima, we were talking about how yesterday she tried to utilize the Belleric as a setter using a flicker and trying to be proactive on a reactive pick, and it ultimately did not work out. Something like a Tigreal should work better in theory, but I think the timing was just off, right? You would want to go into the bottom lane and start to bully the Melissa once you have the implosion. But we saw that from Fatima way too early in the game. Pre-level 4, she was already down there. And usually up against a Melissa with a Hanabi, and up against a Melissa with a Hanabi in your side, by
Mm-hmm.
your side, it'll still be good. But the fact is, in that game, they had an Angela too. So it was a constant 2v2. And without an implosion, without a real way to engage and catch these members from the opposing team, the Tigreal in the bottom lane just had no use. And that's the timing that they need to try to fix, right? It's a bit of that execution. If they try to rotate into the bottom lane, make sure they have someone that can actually lock the Melissa down, punish the no purify. But even then, I feel like it's going to be a bit of a struggle, Eterna. Because even with that, even though Melissa doesn't have the purify, she'll probably have to go away by the time the Tigreal has level 4. And the Hanabi is another big problem because I think there's no real way to get out of this problem unless they just pick a different hero. But Hanabi in the early game basically has zero kill threat. You don't have enough damage. Even if, let's say, you lock down the Melissa can just pop an Inspire and probably out damage both of them. So, yeah, a few dilemmas, definitely. A few mistakes made in the draft, and ultimately it did pay into the game. It did play into the game as to how they were able to execute, and they weren't able to fully bully the Melissa, giving her all the space necessary, all the resources necessary to go for 3 items in the first 7 minutes. That's impressive. And then a sky piercer.
For sure, for sure. And actually, we saw that happening a lot, right? There were so many moments that the Tigreal was looking for picks over on to the Melissa, but the Melissa in a 1v2 situation, in a 1v3 situation, was able and always able to outmaneuver this and deny that kill threat from happening. And again, right? I think one of the I understand in the early stage of the game, sure, the Hanabi doesn't really have a lot of damage to put through. There's absolutely no burst. So there isn't too much of a chemistry going through with the Tigreal. But what I really dislike about the Hanabi as an opponent, right, going against the Hanabi in the lane, like I mentioned in the game, was its range, right? The fact that the basic attacks can kind of mirror on the minions and actually eventually slowly like put you down in terms of that HP, definitely a big problem. But going against something like the Melissa, who has even better range, that entire advantage gets eliminated from you from the get go just because you're in that 1v1 lane against the Melissa. And honestly, a Melissa is not something that we see too often as well in the gold lane. She's not meta, she's very conditional as well, but they were able to make it work extremely well. And again, one of my biggest highlights, if I had to choose an MVP, would have been the Melissa 13-0-0 at some point. I'm wondering whether or not she's going to stick with this Melissa pick or we're going to be seeing a different flavor to her. I'm wondering about the hero pool because definitely coming to game number two, South Africa knows that this Melissa is a big threat. Will they deny it away as a respect ban in even the first phase, right? Because we've been seeing a lot of first phase respect bans coming through in the African online qualifiers, and it's warranted how comfortable these players are on these particular heroes.
It does seem like we will be getting more of that Melissa. We will be seeing way more of that Melissa, especially if Raisha and South Africa continue to pick up the Hanabi in the first pick. And that was a big issue that we were talking about yesterday as well, right? If you want to go for the Hanabi, if you want to go for the Layla, if you want to go for these cheese picks, it's completely fine. It can work. I can definitely see a world and a game where that actually can fit, right? It's a very situational pick, but it can work. The fact that they pick it up in the first phase makes it so easy for the opposing team. In this case, it was Namibia to just counter it. We saw it yesterday. We already saw the exact same thing. Right after the Hanabi was picked up against Madagascar, Madagascar went for the Clint. That's kind of roughly the same thing as a Melissa, but just with more burst over DPS, right? You have a little bit more of that explosive power, and Melissa does more, damage per second in the long run. But it's the same idea. Now with the Melissa, you kind of outrange the Hanabi, you zone her away from the minions where she's strongest. That's the point of the game where she's the strongest, right? When she does get into the minion range, when she can use her bounces on the basic attack passives to use as a way of trading. But yeah, I think going for the Hanabi later on could be a good move. But I also can kind of feel them. I understand where they're coming from because with the Ixia and the Saber and the CC ban down in the first phase, if they didn't go for the Hanabi pick in the first phase, it would be very, very unlikely for them to get it in the second phase. It just seems like for Namibia, they've done their homework really, really well. They have all the data that they could possibly have for South Africa, and they're using that advantage all the way. Really impressive stuff in the bans. Even then, like the Lilia ban, right? So taking away another pick that was used yesterday. Yeah, I can definitely understand why they had to go for the Hanabi, but even then, it's just so tough. I really don't understand here. Like, I feel like they have to improve so many things, and it has to happen in a few minutes. Like they're gonna have to fix it in just a couple of minutes before we get into the drafts.
That's what I really wanted to get at, right? Because you were talking about the Hanabi first pick, and I was like, that's because Namibia forced it in the first pick. The fact that the Ixia was already banned out. So I'm actually guessing that perhaps the gold laner from South Africa doesn't have too much of a wide hero pool, right? Maybe these are the heroes that she's most comfortable with, especially like you mentioned, when you're playing and it being streamed and it being casted over, there's a different kind of
Mm-hmm.
layer of pressure coming through. So you definitely want to be playing heroes that you're most comfortable with. And perhaps her most comfortable heroes are literally the Ixia and the Hanabi. So it's also very intelligent from Namibia, really forcing these pressing issues onto South Africa to outplay them in the drafts and to go in for the counter setups in the drafts as well, because I felt like that really was the setting stone and the foundation of the entirety of the gameplay that Namibia were able to bring in game number one. So the question is, what does South Africa do? How are they supposed to find a loophole over Namibia, who technically we don't have information about, right? That's one of the perks of being Namibia at this point. There's no issue, there's no data on what kind of heroes they like to play. Now we have a little bit of more information, but who's to say that if you ban one of these heroes, either the Fredrin, the Vexana, the Melissa Angela, or the Thamos, that they don't have anything else prepared in their kit to utilize against South Africa?
When you tell me, when you ask me that question, Eterna, I just have to keep on thinking again as to like what they can actually do, right? Because it's so tough. It's one thing already utilizing your own comfort picks and doing well on it, but then utilize not being able to utilize your comfort picks, being banned down in the start of the game, and also not able to utilize these big prio picks as well. So they're kind of placed in a situation where it's kind of a forced error anyways, right? If they get their hands on their comfort pick, it's not going to happen because it's going to be denied away from the first phase. And if they don't, then they play the way that they did earlier. So I think at this point, if comfort is just that hard, if it's really, really difficult anyways to try to pull off heroes that they're not comfortable with, might as well at least get some prio picks in, right? Because if it's the same execution with all these picks, the meta picks, they're meta for a reason. They're good in the current patch because they can utilize a lot of the value that the items have now, the changes that we have. But let's see in the drafts. First change that we see is definitely the side selection. It's blue side now for South Africa. They don't want to go on the red side. It's a bit too reactive, but they still go for kind of the same bans here with the Yuzong. Fredrin, though, is a good adjustment. They want to take it away from the side of Namibia. But okay, so that's the adjustment that we were talking about, Eterna. So they've also already thought about what to go for next. Fredrin, Vexana. They've taken two of those heroes out, and technically the Saber is up for grabs, and Aradia is first pick.
Do you think they're going to pick it up here and now? I mean, remember, they do still have the issue of the gold lane. Looking at patterns, they have utilized the Saber in the first phase. They have went and committed with the Saber in the first phase, but also the Hanabi, right? So we're going to see the adjustments coming through. I mean, you mentioned about the counters to it. If they do want to stick with the Hanabi, maybe utilize it in the later parts of the drafts instead of that first phase, because we do still have a lot of priority picks being opened up. The Luo Yi, right? The Chip, the Angela that was utilized by Namibia earlier on. That was such a problem for South Africa to go against, by the way. But it looks like they are going to go straight for their comfort. They're going to fall back to what they know and are familiar with a Saber in the jungle once again for South Africa. And that's, wait a second, a Hanabi taken away. They're denying this pick away.
And the Saber's enemy in the lore, at least, right? The Alpha pick as well. Hanabi and the Alpha up against the Saber. Then we get the Tigreal as well, so technically for Fatima wants to try to utilize the same thing, but this time it's going to be a bit harder. I think she would have a better time in the previous game up against the Melissa, because the Melissa usually doesn't go for Purify, but hey, Raisha taking a page out of Madagascar's book yesterday as to how to counter the Hanabi, which is get the Clint, get someone who can outrange the Hanabi, get someone who can actually use the explosive damage to zone Hanabi all the way in the early game, and to get rid of the CC immune that she has in her kit with her shield. Belleric ban, though, that's an interesting one, because though we did see the Belleric from the side of South Africa, it was in the hands of Fatima, and it does seem like the Tigreal is not a flex pick. It almost is guaranteed that it'll be used as the roamer. So I guess they're anticipating Young One try to go and play the Belleric. They have a Nana pick too, by the way, and this Nana pick is actually going to be quite good up against the Saber and all the technically initiation power that they have in their composition. A very good engage tool.
But it looks like here in the second phase as well, we have Angela being banned out, denied away from Namibia to utilize like they were able to do in game number one. So they're eliminating that potential Angela as well as the Alpha setup. We don't really have a name for that combo just yet, but the Novaria also gets taken out, so it's a ban threatening phase and a drafting phase full of complete respect. You mentioned the Belleric earlier on. We have the Ixia, the Lilia, the Cece, and now the Novaria has been taken away. So the question is, what exactly is South Africa going to utilize in that mid lane, seeing as these heroes have been eliminated away from them? So far, she's only been able to pick up the Novaria.
Four picks, Eterna. Four picks that we saw in the previous game for Namibia has been banned out. No Thamas, no Angela, no Vixana, no Fredrin. The only thing that we see that's the same, well, technically, is not even on their side. They don't have the same pick at all. Like, even the Melissa was swapped out for the Hanabi. That's an Aurora hover. They're going to lock it in. Love Witch trying to utilize the CC, and I actually like the composition coming in from South Africa this time. They're leaning into a bit more of the combo that they already have, and now it does seem like from the side of Namibia, they want to try to utilize some more utility, whether it be heals, but what is it going to be? Okay, it's a Florin. I thought it was going to be a Diggy. When they hovered over the Diggy, I kind of like blanked out there because that would have been the best pick. That would have been the best pick up against a CC heavy composition, up against the Saber as well. It's pretty good because you have a little bit of a shield as well that you can give towards your team when you pop the time journey. So added sustainability on top of the shielding that you already get from the Hanabi.
Other than that, right, Tigreal, Aurora as well. Remember, Aurora's ultimate is very CC heavy, and the fact that if you have a Diggy in your composition, you can actually negate that entire kill pressure away. But it looks like the Florin is still going to be committed to, ladies and gentlemen, as both of these compositions have been set in stone for both of these teams. And like you mentioned, it feels a little bit more balanced this time, right? In the Gold Lane, we have the Clint versus the Hanabi. That should be a winning lane that South Africa can utilize. Seeing as how Namibia were able to control so much of that tempo because of the gold lane, because of the Melissa in the gold lane, the fact that now they're utilizing the Clint to hover over and to win it out in that gold lane does give a little bit more promise to them as we enter, ladies and gentlemen, to game number 2 in this best of 3 series between South Africa and Namibia. We're at match point as South Africa look to push this to a best of 3 series if they look to qualify over to the next stage of this tournament.
Impure Rage from Ayatka this time on the Alpha. So trying to go for a bit more sustainability and trying to keep the mana from being consumed a bit too much, right? But in the bottom lane, we do see Dark Empress again in a lane all alone, and this time it's up against Clint and Tigreal. So the Clint should be bullying early on, but so far it does seem like Dark Empress is able to clear and shove properly in the mid lane as well. Hecate is doing a bit of damage there. Good response from Love Witch, but Ayatka is already in the enemy jungle. Is going for the invades and going for the purple buff. It just seems like, okay, he's able to just pick it up. Early invade, and doesn't seem like, at least for Aradia, she's able to get any buffs. Not yet.
No, absolutely none. Completely just controlled over in this early stage of the game. Meanwhile, we are looking at different sorts of lanes happening and coming through, and we can already see in the gold lane that the Hanabi is being a little bit bullied despite being in this 2v2 with the Florin as well.
Okay, still in the bottom lane, we see a bit of the same thing. Dark Empress is actually winning out of this lane up against the Clint. It's definitely not one you want to see up against the Hanabi that already struggled real hard just yesterday and earlier here in game number 1 up against a hero that outranges her. But I think it has to do with how Hecate has been playing too, right? Because Hecate all the way, always just in the bottom lane, helping out Dark Empress, makes it so hard for South Africa to utilize that poke that they have in their trade. And it seems like they want to just keep on going for more now. Ayatka in the bottom lane doing some damage back as well. But Fatima's able to get the shove, but then the few slashes that Ayatka is able to just get out, is able to get first blood over to Namibia. Say goodbye to Fatima here early. And Aradia has rotated into the bottom lane, but does not want to go for it. Not just yet. Namibia are just munching on the turret shield in the bottom lane. And unfortunately for them, they won't be able to get the full turret shield, but close enough. Close enough for now.
You would think that that was the gold lane that could have been utilized in favor and in advantage to South Africa, but the fact that Namibia were able to win it out in terms of that gold lane with already giving a Dark Empress a 1-0-0 in this early stage of the game is already a big problem. Meanwhile, Namibia very quick in their tempo, in the way that they want to go about this particular game, and they will be able to pick up that neutral objective. They will be able to pick up that turtle. And look at this, an instant just
Whoa.
advantage and wait, aggression in the top lane, but meanwhile on the bottom side of the map,
Yeah, Fatima's trying to look for an angle to look for an implosion as well. She does get that level 4, but she's not able to pop in the implosion, and it doesn't seem like she's actually leveled up the implosion. I think a bit of a mistap perhaps, because it doesn't seem like she has the green emblem flashing there right beside her name for that ultimate. And for now, it does seem like for Dark Emperor, she's going to be able to just shove this wave easy peasy. Love Witch already using Flame Shot up top. What happened? Young One is going to get taken down. Ayaka and Blondie getting rid of a very, very overextended Dyrod in the bottom lane. That's a good shot, but Fatima doesn't have the implosion and now gets caught on the damage coming in from the side of Kate. A few more shots should take her down, but they're able to escape now. A triple sweep ready for Aradia, who rotates down below, gets it down on towards Kate, but now is able to kind of wait just a bit. Oh no! She dashes to the wrong side, and Dark Empress will be able to get the kill onto her. Kate able to survive as well. Everything going wrong for South Africa.
how does she keep doing the same thing over and over on a pick like the Hanabi, right? A 2-0-0 KDA already in the first 4 minutes of the game. And if you take a look at the gold gap, that's a 4K lead for Namibia already in the 4th minute of the game. And look how they've been able to collapse on different things already. Love Witch already caught very low. I think this is going to be a kill over. There's the passive, but unfortunately, it's not going to be enough to save her life. Namibia picking over the kill onto Love Witch and being able to pick up a turret in the mid side as they continue their collapse on the next neutral objective. That was a kill over. The Nana gets eliminated too.
Just like yesterday, man, Aradia is that glimmer of hope that they have, South Africa, when it comes to at least getting kills in the early game. So far, whoa, Fatima taking a very, very weird maneuver here. That's a very weird path, and she does get shot down by the turret and also Dark Empress. She will fall. Meanwhile, Blondie making good use of the new item there. I think that's the new revamped War Axe that she just got. So trying to look for a lot of these, you know, prolonged team fights up top in the XP lane.
And it looks like it's succeeding, right? And neutral objective take going to fall into the hands of Namibia once again. You can see that Aradia, despite being on her comfort hero, the Saber, hasn't been able to find as much success as compared to Ayaka on the Alpha. Picking up more neutral objectives once again in the mid side again. That's going to be some damage coming through.
Full burst down into Love Witch and good disengage as well with the blooms. Wow, Asuna escapes and gets a double kill. Kate with the healing and Namibia with a big dub, 3-0 as they look to go for the mid lane. They want to go straight for these turrets in the mid lane as well. And so far, Raisha and Fatima, they're still so far. Fatima has the implosion, but it's not even going to be enough, I think, to really force anything or to even defend this for now. Good maneuvers by Namibia. And even with that shove, they're still able to pop in some damage. Molina blitz into the back, just zoning away Raisha from this wave. And another Ice Glacier gets popped down. That's a good frozen, and that's the flame shot to get rid of Asuna. But the triple sweep there earlier wasn't going to be too valuable. That's a bounce coming down, back and forth. A good implosion in the air, but a penalty zone cancels Fatima's engage right into the Spear of Alpha. And there you go, Kate gets the double.
It was initially a great combo coming in from South Africa and a good try to win it out in this team fights. But remember, Namibia have the gold lead and they do have the item lead to boot as well. We can see that the Hanabi with the 505 KDA is already rocking 3 items, the Corrosion Scythe, the DHS, as well as that Golden Staff. So the damage is coming through, and the problem is, even if they want to go for a proper team fight for South Africa, right, the implosion was there. The fact that it was able to be cancelled in with the penalty zone and there was absolutely no follow-up coming through from the rest of the members makes it so that Namibia still have the advantage and the high ground when it comes down into these team fights. And they're very quick to the next neutral objective. They pick up this next turtle. That's going to be a perfect turtle now in South Africa. Absolutely no way to go in for this contest.
this point, what do South Africa even do, right? Even if they scale up to the later stage of the game, oh, some good damage placed down, but Asuna still has the passive, it seems. Good immobility down. Oh, what the heck? Aradia goes for the triple sweep, but gets deleted instead, and Fatima joins her right after. Now Love Witch next on the chopping block, forced to run away, does throw out the flame shot, but even up top, Young One is forced to use the flicker defensively. And it does seem like for Namibia, they want to utilize that top lane pressure to try to take the tier 2 for free.
For sure, they're picking up the pace, they're picking up the tempo that they've already set, like they were able to do in game number 1. And look at that turret just completely fall in the top side. All is left is the inhibitor turrets in the top and the mid side. But even Asuna on the Nana is trying to go for a push, but wait a minute, in the top lane.
A good triple sweep, but it only catches Blondie right there with an implosion, not connecting to anybody. Dark Empress is still free to hit right now, and you can look at the AoE damage just bouncing back and forth. That's a double kill for Dark Empress, and they continue the chase right now with Hecate over there. Just a few more shots to take Fatima down, but she's able to dodge away. A good body block from Raisha to ensure her roamer's safety, but it seems for Namibia, they want to push in the issue right now in the bottom, or no, in the mid lane straight in Spear of Alpha. Love Witch gonna be taken down under the turret. Legendary for Dark Empress as they go for the base turret, and there's no one to stop them this time. Even Melina Blitz to lock Fatima down, who cannot escape. Up top, there's going to be another wave, but now a triple sweep connects, but now it's going to be another bloom that helps them get back to almost full HP. Ayatka doing some damage, and Young One tries to jump in, but gets demolished again. Now the bounce back and forth going on to Raisha, and she will not be able to survive. Hecate gets the elimination. One last ditch effort to save the game from Love Witch, but it will all be for naught. Namibia 2-0.
A clean series for Namibia in our first match of the day, ladies and gentlemen. And again, patterns speak volumes. We haven't been able to see a third game in these best of 3 series, and it just really shows that some of these regions, right, they're already so prepared, they're so confident with the way that they play, that they're able to go for a very dominant one-sided match. Namibia GG against South Africa, but unfortunately that does put South Africa at a 0-2 already in terms of that match rate.
Unfortunate stuff, man, but you know, that's the nature of competition, right? There's the thrill, there's the agony as well. There's someone who will come out as the victors, especially like here, a 2-0 dominant victory, despite the fact that we were talking about how this match in particular maybe could be a full best of 3. And, you know, Namibia crushed those dreams fast, real fast. Right after we got into game number 1, I think after the drafts, we saw the immediate, we saw the level difference, I think, immediately, right as we saw the drafts. And it's unfortunate for South Africa, but hey, this is another way for them to improve, right? They can look back at this game, look at the drafts, and try to look for the improvements. And we will be going back to take a look at the highlights for all the way from game 1 to game 2.
I mean, technically to game number 2, right? We saw that there were adjustments to the drafts, right? I mean, of course, the Saber in the first phase was one of the main, I guess, focuses of South Africa, but the rest of the picks, right, with the Clint coming through, that should have been a winning lane for South Africa. But again, the execution up until that very start, right, from the very beginning, from game number 1, as you can see here on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, it was just so much cleaner by Namibia. Again, Dark Empress on this Melissa was able to outplay so many of these rotations coming through. Although that we're seeing the play from the rest of the Namibia members in the top side, it looked like South Africa were looking for a counter play, a mirror play in the bottom, but look at how she's able to completely outmaneuver that engage from even happening. So South Africa deliberately was looking for some trades over the map, but it wasn't that easy. And up until this point, right, 8 minutes in, Dark Empress was already at a 6-0-0 lead. Now you're looking at a 9-0-0 lead. So that damage coming through with the setups being given over to her, it was very difficult for South Africa to kind of push them away, to kind of zone them away in these team fights, especially when the siege came through. 11-0-0 Dark Empress here in the 11th minute of the game.
It was an absolute stomp in game number 1. I mean, they continue this onslaught in the 11th minute of the game, and with the Melissa snowballed, it's just really tough to go for the defense, right? Because even if they play behind the minions, that actually will be better for Dark Empress on the Melissa. She wants that to happen. She wants the enemy team to be behind some entity so that she can actually get the muddles in, and then the basic attacks in for the AoE. And in this game, it was so sad to see because it almost looked like it really looked promising. I have to be honest with you, especially in the drafts, right? Because they have a composition that can actually combo so well. Imagine if Fatima got an implosion and then they were able to combo it together with the Aurora plus the Abyssum Strike of the Dairoth. So much AoE, and then, I mean, we can add in the Clint damage as well with the grenade bombardments, but unfortunately, this is one of the cases that we were talking about in, after game number 1. You were asking me, Eterna, how do South Africa adapt? And we were talking about maybe they could adapt to the games in the draft first before actually the execution. But it just seems like even when they do that, even when they adjust in the draft, the execution is just not on par. Not yet, at least, because they got the Clint. They got these winning matchups. These were the same matchups that gave them troubles just yesterday. The Clint versus the Hanabi. But this time it played out differently. The Hanabi was able to get the snowball. The Hanabi was able to win out in the lane. And ultimately, we all know how crazy the Hanabi will get in the later stage of the game, especially with 4 kills in the first 5 minutes.
For sure, right? And we saw that really come to play as well in this moment, right? It looked like perhaps South Africa had a great control of the team fight with so many of the utilities that are actually in their kit, right? They have Love Witch on the Aurora with the stuns coming through. This was already really great. But as soon as this implosion came through, not a lot of people were there to follow up because there were a lack of resources. And so Fatima's implosion here was just negated based on the damage already given in by Namibia. So that entirety of the game plan that they really wanted to go for, that entire strategy was taken out of the board. And unfortunately, again, right, for Aradia on the Saber, she couldn't really match the farming pattern and the tempo and the rotations coming in from Ayaka as well. At this point, she was 3 levels below. So there was absolutely no way for a neutral objective contest to happen anyway. And if they wanted to try and push the tempo and kind of prolong it into the late game to wait for, of course, the Clint to get a little bit more items to dish out that damage with so much tools that were in Namibia's arsenal, and the fact that they were already going on a snowball with the Hanabi, by the way, 10-0-9 KDA for Dark Empress in the 9th minute of the game, right before she ended it. It's a lot more difficult to come back in the game.
It was almost impossible, you could say, right? Because at least in game number 1, they still had that late game that they could play around, but in this game, their composition really relied on that early to mid game. Even the Tigreal, I mean, even in the jungle, they had a Saber, someone that definitely needs to get going at the start. And even if the start goes well and somehow Namibia were able to force it out into the late game, then it gets to a point where Saber does get quite relevant in the game. Maybe if she has enough Sky Piercer damage and enough Sky Piercer stacks, then maybe it would change some things. But yeah, if they failed in the early game, it was just really tough to make that composition work. And we definitely got to see that, right? It was an earlier end as well. It was a more dominant run, it feels, even though the Hanabi was swapped up. And even though some of these winning picks, winning matchups have already been secured by South Africa. So I think all that we can say for South Africa is good game, well played. Good luck next time, and hopefully we see the improvement of South Africa, because I think after that performance, they're definitely going to reevaluate. They're definitely going to try to refine what they have in their game, because it's still a very young region, Africa as a whole, right? Especially for South Africa. Hopefully they get the time to improve and to pop off, just like the MLBB men's South Africa. Because, yeah, they brought up the Yin. They brought up the Hellcurt. Remember the Yin Rome Hellcurt mid? We'll never stop talking about that until AEC ends. Maybe until IESF ends. We'll keep on talking about it. Maybe even next year, we'll keep on bringing that up. The Yin Rome and the Hellcurt mid, because it was just so fun, so special. And at the time, it was a breath of fresh air, because we weren't usually used to those kind of picks. We're used to more of the Fredrins. And I'm glad technically that in this game, we did get to see the Fredrin. Now I understand what Naisu felt, dude. Because yesterday I was like, nah, I'm happy that we never get to see the Fredrin. But today I'm like, okay, you know what? After that game 1 Fredrin, I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's kind of satisfying to see a pick that you are normal. A normal pick that you're usually used to seeing. So what about you, Eterna? What about you? What do you think about the drafts that Namibia displayed in game 1 and 2?
think it was very flaunty. I think it was very confident. And honestly, there was a
Mhm.
layer of what would you call it when you're like, it's not bad mouthing, but kind of like showing off, right? Because Namibia is like basically telling South Africa, like, hey,
Showboating.
you wanna exactly showboating, right? Hey, you wanna use the Hanabi? It didn't work out for you. Let us show you how the Hanabi is
Oh, yeah.
properly played, right? Because they're literally utilizing the comfort heroes from South Africa and showing them how it's done and being able to actually find that win against them. So it must be a tough position, honestly, for South Africa, especially for game number two with the Hanabi taken out of the board and denied away. So we're actually going to ask, and I hope we actually get the opportunity to ask Namibia later on whether or not this
Hmm.
Hanabi pick was kind of like a flaunt on their end, right? If it
Yeah.
was just a little bit of attitude from them to, put South Africa and
Yes.
hurt them a little bit in terms of that mentality. Because I think we are going to get an interview with the winners from Namibia being able to win that 2-0 against South Africa earlier in our first match of the day. So we're just waiting on that. Miracle, do you have any particular questions that you would actually kind of focus on if you do get a chance to talk to Namibia?
I think I've gotta ask them if they have been scrimming against South Africa. I want to ask them about the community right now in Africa for the female scene, the women's scene, because again, me and Naisu, we were able to actually talk to Tunisia, and then we were able to talk to a lot of the winners of the matches in the MLBB men's, and they told us that they're actually a very very small community, so they actually scrim against one another a lot. They play against one another, and they actually meet up in these servers when they just play ranked a whole lot. So I want to know if it's the same thing that is happening in the MLBB women's scene for Africa. Are they all like? Do they all know each other? Because if they do, it would make much more sense as to why they banned out the Ixia, the Saber, and the CC in the first game. Or maybe they just did their homework. I would love to know why they actually decided to go for those three bans. Whether they know them personally at this point, or they just watched the stream yesterday. That could have been the simple answer, right? Maybe they're not as tight of a community here in the women's scene. Maybe they just use the data really, really well.
That's actually a really good point. I'm actually wondering the same. Because is it like that for us in like the Indonesian scene? Are we that close knit? I mean, technically we are, right? But to have like
Hmm.
homework on one another, I don't think it's that close because usually scrims happen in different regions, right? Not in the same
Yeah.
region.
I think you want to try to avoid as many like teams that you are going to be facing in the actual tournaments, so they don't
Yeah.
actually get a read on your plays. So yeah, we definitely did have that back in the day for Indonesia when we were still developing as well as a region, when MLBB just got released and some of these pro teams are finally like looking for scrims. Yeah, probably they met each other in rank. They scrim against each other a whole lot, but then as we get into the higher tiers, as they all progressed as well, now they have their own different format and structure when it comes to scrimming. Maybe scrimming up against different countries, or maybe scrimming up against other different teams that are in different tiers as well, but not really scrimming against the teams in their own tier. Because again, a lot of data could be mined by their opponents as well. They could just basically
Yeah.
troll and just look at the draft. So again, there's so many different dimensions, but for an emerging region, for a region that's still developing, it's still really cool to just see that, early phase of development where they're all still so close together. And I think we've been seeing this from a lot of regions outside of Africa too, like North America too. They all kind of know each other. It's a very small community. So everybody knows what this guy plays, and then they can continue to just respect each other in the next few games. And I think that's kind of the pattern we see for every single region that is developing, that is trying to make it into the big stages. Because when you're so small, you need to work together, right? But then later on, when you do get good, everybody's going to be on that level. Everybody's going to be very, very close to your level. So then you might want to just save your strats for the other regions for some of these matches.
That's why it's just really so cool to have a little bit of insight and have a little bit of a peek and a tester to all these different regions, because I think I talked about this a little bit with Naisu yesterday. The fact that different regions kind of have different things going on with them, right? Because you can literally give like some stereotypes out of different regions and how they play the game. Like,
Yeah.
when you're watching a Filipino match, when you're watching a Malaysian match, you know when you're watching an Indonesian match. So the fact that we're having a little bit more insight as to Africa as a region that we don't mostly see, especially come to play in the larger scale competitions and championships, the fact that we get a little bit of a taste here and there in both the male and female MLBB scene has been very, it's honestly, it's been an honor to see them actually kind of develop as players and as teams. The fact that we saw what they were able to bring yesterday, and the way that they were adjusting slowly but surely into their next matches as well. So coming into the next matches that we have of the day, I'm actually curious to see, and actually quite excited to see how these players will start adjusting to one another. But again, I've been a big um advocate for like the women's MLBB scene. I
For
think
sure.
we've been so used to seeing the same regions coming to life in these international tournaments. So the fact that there is now
Yeah.
a media force for the African region is great, right? And hopefully we get to see them compete more and more and see their improvements more and more over the course of time, to finally go head to head against these regions that have held the dynasty for so long, like Bigatron era or Team Vitality, time and time again.
Yeah, yeah. Vigitron era that has now changed, has been acquired by Team Vitality. Yeah, I think we'll be representing Indonesia as well for the women's scene here. But I'm glad you brought up that point. And I think me personally, I have to give a massive shout out to IESF, right? Because even all the way from 2022, when we first got MLBB and IESF, they invited regions that we're just not known to. We don't know a lot of these regions. Like Namibia was the representative for Africa back then in ISF 2022 Bali, and it was all about giving the platform for these new teams, for these new regions to develop and to improve. And we're seeing that already from Africa, right? And it's okay for the teams that loses, for the teams who maybe don't look as convincing, because this is the platform for them to actually improve. Next
Yeah.
season, next year, we're going to definitely see them improve a whole lot. Maybe swap their rosters, maybe keep the same lineup, but then just refine their craft and reevaluate what mistakes they made in the game. So it does seem like, Eterna, we are going to be getting ready for that interview with Team Namibia. And it seems the interview is actually ready, Eterna.
Yep, let's give them a call. Ring, ring, ring. Namibia, are you there? It looks like we are going to
Yes,
be in an
hi, I
interview
am
with
here.
Hekatexo. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah,
Hekatexo?
it's Hecate XO, yeah.
Hekatexo. It's really nice to see you. Congratulations once again, winning that out in a 2-0 against South Africa. You know, first and foremost, I think we would like to know how you're feeling about that match.
Honestly, it was amazing. It was really, the hype was there. Our team, our communication was amazing. So, and we're all now really hyped. The adrenaline is still, I still feel it's still rushing through. So I can say that from the rest of my team as well. It is, it's really exhilarating. So yeah.
Great stuff. Well, I want to continue by asking you a question here, because I was able to interview some of the men's team as well in Africa, and it does seem like for the men's side that it's such a tight knit community there in Africa, right? So they know each other, they know every single one of the teams, they like to scrim and meet each other in ranked games, and I think the same question applies here for me to you. Is it the same for the women's scene? Do you meet a lot of these players in scrims, and is that the reason we got to see the Ixia band, the Saber band, and the CC as well? Full respect in the first game.
Yeah, no, we're quite tight here, but we're not that well known with the other countries' teams actually. So this first team is the first time we have a full female team in Namibia specific. So that was just purely like we saw last night's match with South Africa and Madagascar after we played Madagascar. And then that's where we saw, okay, this is where we're going to make our picks from. This is how we're going to decide. And this is how we're going to strategize. You know, if some of our people got banned, then we'll know, okay, cool, we have plan A, B, C. So, but in Namibia itself, because we're not a lot of female players yet, we are all close with each other. We do know each other. We play again with each other. We even have a few WhatsApp groups and a few gaming communities, and specifically in MLBB. That's how we acquaint with one another.
That's actually super great. And so they were doing their homework against South Africa, right? Hence the bans coming through. I honestly am quite curious about one thing, if I can ask. When you guys let the Hanabi go in the first game, and then in the second game you actually picked it up for yourselves. Was that actually a pick that you wanted to play, or was that a deny pick away from South Africa?
No, no, it was actually a pick that we want to play because first the Melissa
Oh.
was banned, and with our Melissa, she dominates. For our team, it's usually a major pick for Melissa, but because they banned her, then we're like, okay, cool. So our next best pick is Hanabi, so that we have to make sure that our Hanabi gets first pick.
All right, great adjustment, right? And I just want to ask you now, do you guys have a coach, or are you guys doing this? Are you guys just strategizing mid-game, just together as 5 players and maybe some subs?
No, we don't have any subs, but we do have an amazing coach. Caleb, if you
I
wouldn't
see.
mind, just quickly stand here next to me. Just to show your face, please. This is our coach.
Hey,
This is Caleb.
Hi,
He's also a
Caleb.
mythic immortal, and we made sure we're getting the best coach out there. But in between, before the matches, when we were like, okay, cool. So we don't know anymore who to ban. Yo, coach, help us out. And he just jumped in and was like, okay, cool. You know what? Go for this. He's on it. He knows the stuff. Helping us with our emblems as well. Huge guy. Love that man.
that's great, man. I mean, seeing the coach there, I think we were assuming that, there's a lot of structure here. So I don't know where the
Yeah.
understanding is coming from, the players, obviously, but then knowing now that you guys have the coach, and shout out to Coach Caleb, right? Caleb was his name. Shout outs to him
Yeah, Caleb.
for an amazing
Mm-hmm.
draft, amazing
Shout
backup
out.
as well for the team. So, yeah, I think that's all for my questions, Eterna.
I think
Thank
that's
you.
all for me as well. Just
Thank you for
congratulations once
having.
again, Hakatexo. Hopefully, we get to see you move forward, and
Thank you.
hopefully, we get to see you at AEC. So, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Have a great
definitely.
rest. You guys completely deserve it.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much.
much. Have a lovely time, guys. Bye.
Goodbye.
Wow. Okay. So, they do have a coach. So, it makes sense, right? The way that they were
It makes
playing was a
sense
little
now. The
bit more
structure.
systemized.
Hmm.
Exactly. The structure of their gameplay as well, not just in the drafts, but also like their gameplay, the fact that they understood their winning conditions with the drafts that they were given. But again, okay, so I think I was thinking a little bit too into it about the Hanabi pick, but like, so I guess Hanabi is like a big pick in this region, right? Because
Yeah.
yesterday we saw a lot of Hanabis in the Golden as well. Is it the same for the men's scene, or is it just the female scene pick coming through?
we, we did see like 2 Hanabi games, I think, but for the most part, it's just the normal picks, like the Roger, the Carry, even, and we haven't seen a whole lot of Clint. So yeah, the Hanabi is still kind of niche in the men's scene, but I think it's because the women's scene, we're seeing a lot more fights, we're seeing a lot more of those combos come in that AOE just gets so much more value. Hence why the Hanabi, and we did, hear in as well to Hekate. She said that if it wasn't the Hanabi, it's the Melissa. So still in line with that AOE damage, still in line with the team fighting.
It's just really their identity, right? And so now we're getting a little bit more of a feel as to the play styles coming through from the African region, right? They're so heavily based on these skirmishes, these team fights in the early stages of the game. They're very aggressive, by the way, with the way that they play.
Very.
Like if they can find a pick under minute number one, they'll go for it and they look for a snowball from then and there. And I think that's some of the similarities that we're seeing from different regions, but still in the African online qualifiers. But wow, again, another 2-0, Mirko. Were you expecting a 2-0? I think you were expecting this match to be at least a game number 3. But, our next match
Yeah.
of the day, remember, Egypt versus Tunisia. I think this is one of my biggest highlights. Nisa will be stepping in to cast this one with you, Mirko, I do believe.
Hmm.
I'm actually quite excited to watch this one.
Yeah, I think I'm very excited to watch this one, especially, right? Because, my dreams were shattered. My dreams of a full 3 game series were already shattered after match number 1. But still, it was great. It was a great performance by Namibia. Definitely not taking away from that win because it was spectacular. And they definitely deserve that win after, all the hard work that we just heard from the interview as well. The fact that they got a coach, the fact that, this is the first time ever that we're seeing a
Coach
female team
Caleb.
from Namibia as well. Coach Caleb. Hey, we have a Coach Caleb as well in Indo, actually. Fun facts for
Huh?
Evos. But yeah,
Oh,
the
his name's
analyst.
Caleb?
Remember, his name is Caleb. So
Oh, right. Yeah, you're
yeah,
right.
I guess there's just something with Caleb and MLBB. I don't know why all the Calebs are good at MLBB, right? Especially in the coaching department. But we'll have to do a research on that. Why are Calebs just good at the game? But obviously, Egypt versus Tunisia. This has got to be the highlight match of the day because of the interview yesterday. We heard from them themselves. Egypt wants this matchup, and I'm glad that we get to see it streamed. Okay, you're not going to be casting a turnip, but I want to, because you're not going to be casting, I'm going to ask you for your
Okay.
prediction. You think Egypt's
What's
going to get it done, or do you think Tunisia is going to get it done? And the score, too. Got to put the burden on you.
You know, Mirko, never in my life have I witnessed a 6 minute game on a competitive
Oh,
level of MLBB. So, with that
okay.
being said, and the way that they were able to dominate that game, I will predict a clean 2-0 for Egypt just because of that. But not to take away
Ooh.
from Tunisia. You know, I love my curses. You know, I'm just going to say it's a 2-0.
Oh,
So, hopefully, we'll get a 2-1, right? Like, your curse has been just, it's, what do you call it when it like goes to me too? What's the word for it?
contagious? It's been
Yeah, it's
contagious?
contagious. Your curse is contagious, so I'm gonna pull that out.
Okay, so I've never seen someone play both the sides so convincingly, right? You've supported Egypt and Tunisia so convincingly. You've given both of them some good support there, and I think for the people in the chat as well, they definitely realize that. So if you guys want to predict, it's very very easy to do so. Go ahead and chat in the comment section, and also if you guys want to keep up with all the updates, go and check out www.isf.gg because all of the updated matches, even the matches that they're going on right now that are not being streamed, the results will be all there.
So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go on a short break before we get into the highlighted match of the day in this best of three. So, we will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned for the African Open qualifiers here at ISF. See you guys soon.